In this section we will be constructing the tree platforms, and there are 4 circular platforms and 1 kind of oddly shaped platform. And we'll start with the circular platforms, and on our cutting guide there's a section called tree platforms. We'll cut out the circles, they're listed at the top, and then the support brace pieces, that's what we'll need to start with. And then on the lightweight chipboard, under tree platforms, there's 4 pieces for the inside support rings and 6 pieces for the outside support rings. I'm going to start by working on the inside support rings, and we make 3 of them the same, so I'm just going to put 1 strip aside. And I think you can see here that I've prepped these strips with score tape on one side. And then I have just one of my pieces of 1-inch pipe here. You can use a taller piece if that's easier for you. What we want to do is wrap this around and make a snug fit, and just go and go until we end and finish up the strip. Now just make sure you get as snug a fit as possible. Work on your work surface so that the bottom edge, so the whole construction stays nice and flat against the table, and just make sure you get snug when you first get it attached there. Now when it's all wrapped around there, of course it's going to be sticky on the outside, so I just cut a strip of 3/8" cardstock that I'll wrap around. Again, working on my work surface, and I'll just cut it off and fasten it with a little dab of glue. And then I'll make 2 more just like that. Now for our 4th strip, we're going to take one of our 1/2 inch elbows, a 45-degree elbow, and we'll go do the same thing. We'll just use one end of the elbow. Now on mine, one end is smoother than the other, so I'll use my smooth end, and I'll just do that exactly the same, just around the bottom of the elbow here. And earlier I gave you a little tip about cutting out these circles, and I'll just repeat it now. When you go to cut them out, first cut about 1/8 of an inch away from where you want to have your final cut, and then cut around the circle, and you'll find that much easier to do. So we've got a series of circles here. They kind of go down in 1/2 inch increments, starting with 6-inch diameter, then 5.5 diameter, 5 inches, and 4.5. And we only need one side right now, so I'll pick up a top side from all of these and just put them to the side for right now. And what I want to do is just draw a diameter or a line straight down the middle, and I'll just use my gridded mat to do that. And here, this is the 6-inch circle, so it's pretty easy. Just center it between 2 of your grid lines and draw a line straight down the middle. And then from the edge, measure in 1 3/8", 1 3/8", and make a tick mark there. And we'll do that same thing for the 5.5-inch circle and the 4.5-inch circle. Now here for these, just use the 1/4-inch marks on your gridded mat, and then you can make a central line. Again, we'll measure in 1 3/8". Now for the 5-inch circle, we'll first start by making our central line. This time we'll measure in 1.5 inches, and draw a mark. And then I'm also going to write on here, small circle. That's to remind myself that I'm going to use the small ring on this one. The other three get the large rings. And I'll just put this 5-inch circle aside for a moment. And for the other three, I'm going to take my little piece of pipe here and I'm going to line the edge on the tick mark that we made at 1 3/8 and just try to get it centered on that diameter line. It's not crucial, just try to get it as centered as possible. And then draw a circle around it. I'll do that on the 5.5 and the 6-inch diameter circles as well. And then for the 5-inch circle, I'm going to take my little elbow piece here and I'm going to line that up on the tick mark I drew, center it as best as possible on that diameter line and trace around it as well. And then with a fresh blade in your craft knife, go ahead and cut out all 4 of those little circles. And after you finish cutting out your circles, make sure you test that you can get the pipe through them, and for this small one, that the end of the elbow goes through there. And then we'll glue our rings that we made onto that circle, and I'm just going to use the pipe as kind of a guide to make sure I get them in the right place. And just once you put it in there, make sure you give the pipe a couple of twists so that it doesn't glue in there. We don't want to, we're just using that pipe as a guide. We don't want it to stick to the ring. And then we'll just let these sit here and dry until they are thoroughly dry. So now that my rings have set up, I can go ahead and add the outer rims. And the first thing I did was to cut a bunch of little pieces of tape. I just cut them almost to the end here, and I'll be able to grab these as I go along and use the tape kind of like clamps. So you'll see me with that on there, but I'll have this off to the side. Now I'm starting with the 5.5-inch radius circle because it has one unique thing about it, and that is we need to punch a hole in the outer rim. And you can see I have my crocodile out here. I'm marking over 3 inches from the end of the strip, and I'm just going to set my crocodile and use the smaller 1/8 inch measure or hole, and I've set it so that it will punch that hole right in the center of my strip. Now when I go to glue this on, and I've already kind of trained this to want to curve, but when I go to glue this on, I'm going to line up this hole with the diameter on the wider side. So here's my hole, and here's my diameter line. This is obviously my wider side. So when I put this on, I want to have that hole right lined up with that line coming across. So I've prepped my rim with some of those little pieces of tape I showed you. I'm just going to work in sections here and put down a little bit of glue and then hold it in place and put the tape down. And what I'll do is start at that diameter mark, and then I'm just going to work this way a little bit. Find the hole. And this is just sitting right on top of that edge and curving around. And just, I'm going to fasten a couple pieces of tape, then add more glue. And obviously on these bigger circles, it's going to take more than one piece of the strip of 3/8 inch material to go around the entire perimeter. And it's a good idea to have one of those little tape flags right on the beginning and the end of each piece that you use. So I'm going to let this section dry, and I can go ahead and work on one of my other rims. And they're all done the same way. This is the only one that had something special with this hole punched in it. Now once your first part is set up, we can go ahead and finish this. I'm going to put a little glue there in the seam and then just continue on. And then I'll measure to see where I need to cut that off. And then I've cut some little pieces of cardstock that's slightly less than 3/8 with some score tape on it, and I'll just use that to reinforce the joins. And then I'll set all of these aside to dry thoroughly. So while our platforms are drying a little bit, we can make the reinforcement for the screw eye. And I've just, from one of my medium weight support brace pieces, I cut a little piece that's 2 inches long, and I'm going to mark it at 1/4 inch, and then 3/4 inch, 1 1/4, and 1 3/4. And then I'm just going to use the 1/8 inch setting on my crocodile, and I still have it set at 3/16 so that it'll punch the hole right in the middle. And I'll punch a hole on each of those, 4 lines. Then I'm going to cut this piece apart in between each one of these. And this is an 1/8 inch skewer. That's what I'm going to use for the rungs on my ladder, and I'm just going to use that to help me get my holes aligned, because I'm going to glue all 4 of these together. And in case your holes are a little bit off center, make sure that you get this put in order so that the unit stays pretty symmetrical, so that they're all at the end. It's a 3/8 inch high unit. So I'm just threading these on here. It doesn't matter if one is a little bit shorter or longer. And then I'll take my skewer. This is my 5.5 inch circle that has the hole in the outside here. And I'm going to put some additional glue on the front of this and on the bottom. And just thread that in. And that's going to give some extra bearing when we put our screw eye in here later. So now that our rims are totally dry, we can use our tree platform support braces. These are medium weight that's been cut 3/8 of an inch to make kind of like spokes going across inside of here to give some additional support. I think you can see where I've just drawn about 6 lines in there. I used the diameter and added a couple more lines. And on the bigger one, I think I might have 7 lines. They're just kind of guidelines so that I can get some support in there. And the only one that we want to do something a little bit special with, this is the 5.5 inch one that has the hole in the rim. And what I want to have is 2 spokes here that go on either side of that hole, so that the screw eye will be able to go inside of there, but as we screw it in, these will give some support to it, so it'll be supported as we put pressure on it to screw it in. And other than that, I'll just fill in with my regular spokes here. And I'll just cut them to length and use some wet glue to put them in. So once you have all of the spokes on, run some glue around all of the spokes and the edges and put your other circle on, lining it up as best as you can. and then turn it upside down and put it under weights to dry. So I left my tree platforms under weights overnight, and now they are all ready to go. And I'll just put them aside for right now. Now we're going to construct the middle platform that goes in tree 3. Tree 3 is our biggest tree, and under the medium weight chipboard we have some pieces that start out saying tree 3 middle, so you'll need all of those pieces under the medium weight chipboard. There's also a couple of pieces listed under the tree platforms out of lightweight chipboard. We're not going to need those right away, but I've just got them cut as well. So I'm going to start with just a little glue up. We have doubles of our piece A and piece B, so I'm just going to glue those up and set them under a weight while we do the next step. Next we'll do some cutting on the tree 3 middle top. And in your cutting guide, there is a layout for these measurements. And this isn't a template, it's just to help you to make these measurements, because sometimes when I say measure over and measure down, it can be confusing. So we'll just refer to this to mark our lines here and then cut out our shape for the middle platform. So I have my chipboard oriented so that the 5 3/4 inch dimension is going across the top and the 5 1/4 is coming down the side. And the first thing I'm going to do is mark this 2 1/4 inch line over from the left. So I'll just use my craft mat to help keep things square, and then I'll measure over 2 1/4 and draw a line there. Then I'll turn it on its side this way. And I'm going to measure this 1 3/8 inch down. So now I've marked out this square, a rectangle, and it's going to get cut out, so I'll just mark an X in it. Now down here we'll mark out this corner. And I'm going to turn it this way so that I can more easily measure this 1 3/4 inches. And now I've just turned it upside down so I can make this measurement, which is 1 1/8. And I'll mark that with an X. And now I just want to connect this diagonal from this point of our rectangle, top rectangle, to this point in our bottom rectangle. And this part up here will cut off. So I'll go ahead and cut my shape out. And now that I have my shape cut out, I'm going to write top on here. So that when we continue to build this, we'll know which side is the top. So now I'm going to flip this over so I'm looking at the bottom. And I want to extend first this line here. So I'm just going to line it up again on my craft mat. This was the 2 1/4 line. So I'll just extend it up here so that it continues here. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this line over here so that we form a triangle on the bottom. And this one was at 1 3/4 inches. And that will just give us some guidelines when we go to put this together. So I still have the bottom side facing up, and these are my little double glue up pieces. I'm going to take the longer one and just check to see if its length is correct. And mine needs just the tiniest little bit of a trim down here at the bottom, at this end, so I'm going to trim that off. And once I've trimmed off my piece to the correct length, I'll run a bead of glue along that edge and glue on my piece that's doubled up, making sure that it stays nice and perpendicular and right along that edge. I'll just let that set up for a minute. And again, I used my little trick of using the two distress ink pads to help keep this piece in a nice perpendicular fashion. Now I'll take my shorter piece and check its length. This one is right on, so I'll just go ahead and run a bead of glue along this edge and put this one in, and again let that set up and dry in a perpendicular manner right on that edge. This piece butts up against the piece we already installed, so make sure you put some glue on the end there. Now I'll take my long strip and I'm going to hold it on top of this piece of the triangle, this edge here, and measure it to length so that it does not go over the corners. So it will probably be just a little bit shorter than the length of the diagonal. Once you have that piece cut to length, go ahead and run a bead of glue and install that right on that edge. I'll let this diagonal piece dry for a few minutes so it's in there solidly when we go to put in the next two pieces. Now I'm going to measure along this line that I drew and see how long of a piece I need to go over on this side, and it's okay if it extends a little bit past the corner there. I'm going to cut mine 3 3/8. Your measurement may differ slightly. I wouldn't expect it to differ very much. And then I've run some glue along the line and then up in this corner here, and I'll make sure that this piece stays flush with this cut edge as it goes across. So once this leg of the triangle is dry, I'm going to just take my last piece here and hold it up to see how long it needs to be and make a little tick mark and then cut it off and install it just like we did the other pieces. Now there is more work to be done on this piece, but we'll do that after we get our trees assembled. So I'm just going to set this aside to dry thoroughly.